Okay, my name is Mike Schenck. I've been working with Great Plains for probably, well, a long time. And I've been at Turnkey for about 8 years now. So, and normally, if you guys have been here before, Diane is the one doing the year-end close processes. She is out of town, so I get to do this in her stead. So hopefully, I'll try to keep it as she used to do it. Okay, so the agenda then, what we're going to go over then is the year-end close processes for all the different modules in GP. So as you can see, we'll just go down the list. And this is actually the list, or the order in which you should be closing the year. All right, so, and we keep payroll separate after general ledger just because it really is a separate process. So not everybody in here uses payroll, so that is a separate process, but everybody does use the other ones, especially general ledger, so it does apply to everybody. If you do have payroll, then of course the last one would apply to you as well. So again, you would start with inventory, go to receivables, payables, fixed assets. If you do have AA, I don't think anybody said they did when they were in here, when they asked before. And then of course general ledger is your last thing to do to close out. So now the year-end close, it's always involves a fiscal year-end close. Okay, all these have fiscal year-end closes. There's a couple of them that also have calendar year-end closes, and that's what's very important. The two that have calendar year-end closes are receivables and payables. And I'll show you that when I show you some of the screenshots on how we do that. But we are assuming a 12/31 year-end. If you don't have a 12/31 year-end, then you've already done, should have done anyway, your fiscal year-end close for your different modules. Okay, so but again, in my example here, I'm going to be talking about a 12/31 year-end. Okay. All right, and as I said before, what we want to do is we want to complete these in this order, and we'll also through this presentation there will also be some what Microsoft calls KB or knowledge base articles, and those numbers. Are we given those? Like everybody's going to have that? Okay. So what you can do is you can just go out to the internet and find those articles, and there'll be a lot more detail under each one of those. And there's specific ones, and you'll see when I get into it. There'll be specific ones for each of these different modules that you have. If you have any questions or if you wanted to get more detail on that. Okay. So again, we wanted to go in order of inventory, receivables, payables, fixed assets, and then general ledger. And like I said before, at the note at the bottom there, if you do have payroll, those are different than any of the other procedures, and I'll talk about those at the end of this broadcast. Okay, so let's get right into inventory then. These are some of the steps, just a couple of things to do before you're closing the inventory. So, and it really depends on what you, if you're using sales order or purchase order processing. All right, so if you do have those, then we want you to go ahead and do a reconcile on those modules. And again, it's very important to do these in this order. Okay, so we want to do sales order. This is the reconcile I'm talking about. Sales order, purchase order, and then inventory in that order. Okay, and again, this is all detailed in those knowledge bases that I'll be describing later. Like I said before, this is to be done at the end of your fiscal year. Okay, there is no calendar year closing for inventory. Okay, and again, a note is that you would want to do this before any new transactions that would affect your quantities are posted for the new year. Okay, so just make sure you've got everything done for your fiscal year before you do anything in the next fiscal year. Go ahead and do the close for your inventory. And what does it do? This is exactly what it will do for you. Again, transferring all those current year. Basically, there's buckets in Great Plains on the different lookups that you're able to access. And so you've got your current year bucket and last year bucket and a life-to-date bucket, life-to-date bucket. So it's just taking those and putting them into the next bucket and preparing it. Basically, moving it from your current year, wiping that out because it's not your current year anymore, and putting it into the to the next bucket for you. It also will update each item's beginning quantity. Makes sense, right? Because it's the new year, so it's going to be a new beginning quantity. Zeroes out that quantity sold field. Again, because you're starting new with a new year, so you want those all to be 0. And then also there's some options in there that if you want to use those, as you can see, Removing any discontinued items, that's a good time to do that. Removing the sold receipts, just basically cleaning up your inventory module if you want to do that. It's optional. You don't have to do that. I would recommend doing that just to make sure you keep it clean going into the next year. And this is some of the things that where it will affect the records and when you look at things. For example, on your smart list, if you're doing a smart list on item quantities, as you can see, one of the big columns there would be the quantity sold column. So what that would do, once you do this, it'll wipe that out. As you can see also down within GP in the items quantity maintenance, that box down there with the sold. Okay, so we want to zero that out before we start the next year. And again, this end of your fiscal year before you start the next one. Okay. Okay, so some of the steps then before you close the year. Again, you can read right here, posting all your purchase order, your sales order processing, and inventory transactions for the current year. Those are the three modules that are intertwined very tightly. So any purchase order processing transactions, again, that's what you're ordering. The sales, that's what you're selling, and then the inventory that would reduce or increase any of your inventory for that year. Okay, and then this is the what I was talking about here, the KB knowledge base, and that's the number 872713 for inventory. And a lot of these have not changed over the years. The processes are still the same. So if you've done this before, it's pretty similar to what you've done in the past. Okay, you just got to remember to do that. And also, one thing that I always recommend, I mean, you can never have too many backups. So anytime you do any of this stuff, I would do it. Well, first of all, you don't want any users in Great Plains when you're doing this. So, and then take a backups, before, during, after. You can never have too many backups. Okay, because if you find out that something went wrong or something, maybe you lost power or something during a close, you're going to want to restore back to that prior. Okay, so it really depends on you how much risk you want to take. I would recommend doing it after each. Well, again, depending, if you've got 100 databases and it takes you a couple hours to back them all up, that might be another story. But if it only takes you a few minutes to back up all your databases, I would do it after each one of these modules. So for example, take your backup at the very beginning, do your inventory, take another backup, and you can even label it, before inventory, after inventory, and just go down the list and then go, before sales order, before purchase order, before fixed assets, that kind of thing. Okay, you can never have too many backups. And you'll know once you need to restore from one. You'll be glad you did. And again, this is my point here, is make your restorable backups. And it also, it does explain there in that KB when to make them. But again, even I would just say just make them as you see fit, and at least whatever's in that KB and then some. Okay, so as long as it's reasonable for you to make the backups, do it. I just recommend doing that. Okay, and then it also talks about the historical inventory trial balance report. That is built in after GP 2010. I would think most of you would already have that in there, so we won't go into that too much. And then here are some of the different, the one we already talked about was the 872713. Those are all of the year-end closing procedures, but then there's some other things where, just in case something happened, like maybe you hit the button twice or something, you forgot to remove the discontinued item, or it didn't remove them. There's different knowledge base articles for that as well. So that goes into a little bit more detail. Again, the first one is the overall procedures on how to do that. I would definitely recommend reading that. And as long as everything goes okay, you don't even need these other ones. So, but they're available in case you do run into something, or if you just have questions, that kind of thing. If you want to become an inventory closing expert, something like that. Okay. Oh, let me go back to inventory. Any questions on inventory at all before we go on to the next one? And again, we can if you don't want to ask them now, we can have them at the end of the this presentation. Okay, so receivables. Again, this is one of the two that has a fiscal and calendar year close. And you'll see when you go into close that, the default, again, if you have a 12/31 year end, you're fine. I mean, because when you go in to do your close, you'll see there's a button for fiscal and calendar, and then there's one for both or for all. So that's the one that is the default, is the one for all. So if you are not on a 12/31, that's when you would have to change the fiscal year only. Okay, and again, the calendar year should be done at the end of the calendar year prior to posting any transactions for the next calendar year. Same thing with the fiscal year, it's just the fiscal year portion of it. And this is what I was talking about. When you go in to do that on your sales page, you could just go into routines, and it's under routines, and then year-end close. And the default is all, as you can see on the button there. And also what you'll see, one other thing that I recommend, and this is just my personal opinion from using this for quite a number of years. If you look at the date column there, that is the date, that's the default. As you can see, that's the default when you're using the sample company Fabricam in Great Plains, 4/12/2017. Whatever date you have in there is what's going to show in your last closing date once you hit this button and you say process. So what I recommend is before you even start any of this stuff, let's say you're doing it for this year, for 2017, I would, and you're doing it first week of January or something like that, I would go back and change your date, your system date in Great Plains to 12/31/2017. All right, so that means that you're going to have everything posting and everything transacted on the last day of your fiscal period and your calendar period. All right, so let's say you change that to 12/31/17. You're going to do both of these, and then you go ahead and hit the process. And of course, you would want to get that report, print that report out. What I recommend, that could be a pretty big report, depending on how many customers you have. So I would definitely print that to the screen first and just see if you even need that. If not, and then because you can always print from there, from the screen, you can print it out to a printer. But yeah.
So two thoughts. One is, where do you change that date? Do you hit those double arrows?
No. Well, it's before, once you log into Great Plains, if you go down to the bottom left where your user ID is and your, I wish somebody had one up, your user ID and your company that you log into, there's also the date down there, the system date. So you could just click on that and just type in 12/31/2017, yeah.
So can you move it forward? Like, so I would be doing this on Friday the 29th. Would I set it? Can I set it to the?
I would, yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. Yep. Again, just to stay consistent, you know what I mean? Because so then you know that you're on the last day of that period. You can always leave it on 12/29 if you want, because that's when you really would do it. But again, I wouldn't want it. I don't like seeing, January 6th or January 5th or something like that, because, maybe you might have missed something. In other words, it might have posted in the wrong period. So by doing that, by changing that to 12/31/17, you're assuring yourself that any posting that needs to be done, especially when you get to the general ledger, because it's gonna actually post your retained earnings, it's gonna go into the right year and the right period. That's why I recommend doing that. But to get back to printing that report, and the way I know that is because I had to do one time, and I think it printed out maybe 1,500 pages or something, so I learned that real quick not to do that. Because what it does, it goes through each of your customers, and it does all this stuff, and it tells you exactly what you did on each customer for that year. So unless you own a tree factory or a paper factory, I would not print it to the printer. Okay, so what exactly does it do then? So the fiscal, the calendar, let's talk about the calendar then first. All the calendar year-end does is change closes your year-to-date finance charges and move them to last year. Again, we talked about the buckets where you got your current year, last year, and then life to date. So it's going to take those current year charges, move them into last year, and wipe it out so you can start fresh with the new year. The fiscal year then closes every other amount that you have in there. Okay, that's in the receivables management module. So as long as you're doing both of these at the same time, it's no big deal. So, but the fiscal year again would change all your. When you look at a customer summary, for example, you're going to look at your sales and how much sales you had. Obviously, you're going to want to look at your fiscal year compared from year to year. So that's what that does. The fiscal year closes all that. And this is what I was talking about here. This when you go to look at a customer summary, for example, that summary view that I've got marked right in the middle there, it is what it is. It's the amount since last close. So if you forget to do that and you don't close it until, or maybe you post something for 2018 that should be in 2017 and you didn't close it until a week later in January, that's what's going to show up for the year to date, the amount since last close. Okay, so that's why it's real important to get that done for before you do any transactions for the new year. All right, so we just want to move those buckets over. So year to date, we want it to move over to last year, and of course update your life to date as well. Okay. Same thing with your smart list. It's the same buckets that you see back on this right here from the customer summary. That's what it reads it from. And then this is just, again, if you're using smart list regularly, you're going to want to keep those accurate. And the way to do that is just by, again, making sure that you do everything on a timely basis for that. Okay. Okay, so what are the steps? If you notice, they're pretty similar to what all of them are going to be similar. If you know one module in GP, you're going to be able to figure out how to do the steps in all the other modules as well, because they're all built pretty much the same, just different things. Receivables is sales oriented, payables is obviously vendor oriented. So again, just make sure all your transactions are posted for the current year. If you want to look at the other steps, again, the backups, things like that, we've got that knowledge base 857-444. Again, backups, backups, backups. The one thing about receivables, it's not completely date sensitive. Most of it is, but there are some. So that's why I'm saying the best option is just to close the year on time. All right. And again, here are some of the different knowledge base articles that you can see. The one we talked about before, the 857-444, that's the overall view of the entire process. But then there's other things in here that, especially the second one, if you're doing a year-end close after December 31st, if you forgot or something like that, it'll give you some steps that you can take in there. I'm not going to go into detail on that. But there are things that you can do just in case you missed that. I mean, you're not, out of luck if you forget to do it on December 31st or if you've actually posted some things in the new year. And I just threw that other one in there about removing outdated statement runs from the reprint statement window. Again, talking about what reports you want to come print out or not. Oops, let me go back. Receivables. Any questions on receivables at all? Pretty similar to inventory. You'll notice that they're all pretty similar, just again, different things. This one is the only thing that's different with this is again, that it does have the calendar year end, which is different than the fiscal year, which is in addition to the fiscal year end. Okay? Are we getting any questions? Or will you let me know if we have it, or should we check? I don't want to get too far in.
We do have one right now. If
okay.
the company is unable to close the receivables before processing transactions for the next year, are we still able to do the close procedures for other modules?
That's a loaded question, just because depends on what the other modules are, I guess. I think in that case, because again, these are steps that are supposed to be run in order. In other words, inventory first, receivables next, payables next, fixed assets I think was up there next, and then general ledger. So it really, that's a hard question to answer just because I don't know the exact circumstances of what you're trying to do. So yeah, we would have to follow up on that in that case. Okay, is that it? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about payables. Again, payables is another one of those that has a calendar year end. All right, so again, I'm assuming, the 12/31 year end for this one so that they would be done both. So again, just make sure you run it at the end of the year prior to posting the next year. Same with the fiscal. And the box even looks the same. The window even looks the same. It's just that you know that it's payables now. So, and again, if you had that 12/31/17 date on there, that's what would show up in there, and that's what would show in the last closing date. Okay. Again, print that report to the screen, please. Okay, so what does it do? Again, the calendar, since that is date sensitive, when we're talking about your 1099 amounts, that is what moves it from the your last year column, from your year to date, I'm sorry, to the last year column. So again, it's taken from the one bucket into the next bucket. So it's clearing out that year and letting you able to process those 1099s now. The fiscal year end close process is what transfers everything else. So any of the other, vendor information as far as, what was paid, the dollar amounts, things like that. Okay, as you look at the note down at the bottom, the default view when you're looking at some of these on the summaries, for example, the vendor and even before with the receivables, is the amount since last close. That's the view that's in there. So if that's different, our support department has some scripts that can be run to correct those amounts if those do look different. Or again, if you forgot to do something, or you were late in doing it or something like that. So you could just contact our support department, and we have some scripts for that. Didn't you write those scripts, Chris? I thought you did. Yeah, I thought you did. Okay, and again, this is what the vendor credit, since we're talking about payables here, the vendor credit summary. This is where it would take your year-to-date, zero it out, and move it over into the next year. Okay, it's not going to do anything. Again, this is for the calendar year. It's going to be your 1099s, and for everything for your fiscal year, it's going to be everything else. So it's not going to change your aging periods or anything like that, or any of your any of those buckets, because it doesn't look at those buckets at all. It just looks at your year-to-date, life-to-date, year-to-date, and last year. So, for example, like in the down at the bottom, the number of paid invoices, for example, that year-to-date would if you close this one, the one would be 0, and the life-to-date would be down to actually it would just be 1, because there's only one life-to-date. So that's really what it's doing. It's again, the buckets. If you think about the bucket approach, and then what you're seeing when you're looking at the summaries. And again, the same thing with the summaries as the smart list. As you can see, some of these 1099 amounts here that are on here that I'm showing you. Again, your life to date. Last year is the LY is the second column. Year to date is that third column I've got there. Things like that. Okay. Okay. Again, very important. Post all your transactions for the current year. So if you do have transactions for the new year. So, for example, if you got to pay somebody and you haven't closed yet, let's say you are closing the first week of January, for example, and you've got some checks that need to get out or something like that. If you want to do those for the year 2018, just save them in a batch and don't post them, because again, once they're posted, that's when they affect those buckets that I've been talking about before. All right, so if they're in a batch, they're just saved in a batch for now, and you can always post those later. And of course, again, make a backup. And this KB number is 875169, and that'll tell you, I'll give you all the details for all of the payables, year-end closing procedures for payables. Okay. Okay, so again, we talked, it's the same thing with receivables, is that it's not fully date sensitive. But again, I do recommend process those year-end closing at the actual year-end. Again, it's not the end of the world if you miss it or if you don't get it on the exact date. We can help you with that if possible. But just to eliminate those issues, just make sure you just do it at the end of the year. And again, there's some information here on the 1099s. If there's nothing, you can't go back and say, okay, this should be a 1099 transaction. What you can do those is, and this explains it in here, is that you can go into the 1099 details window, and you can actually edit that information. So if you found out that you've got a 1099, or maybe you missed it, maybe you didn't, you have a 1099 vendor, but you didn't mark it as a 1099 vendor, and you have quite a few transactions with them. What you can do is you can go ahead and mark it for the next year going forward, so that it'll automatically do it. But you can go in before you print out your 1099s and edit that information. So if you find that you've done something wrong, or if you've missed something, something like that, or maybe even just one transaction that didn't get updated as a 1099 transaction, you can go in and edit those individually. And that's just into each individual vendor you would do that. Okay? And this is the information that I just told you about that. Okay. One of the other things you can do is you can print a 1096 summary form from Great Plains as well to do that. Okay, so the 1099s, again, if you missed anything, you can edit them very easily, very easily. Now, you don't want to get in the habit of doing that all the time. That would kind of defeat the purpose. But if you did find out that you missed something, you can, of course, go in and edit that. Yep, let's go back. Questions on payables at all? Anybody? Anything from there?
No, I don't have any questions.
Nothing? Okay. Nobody? All right. Yeah. Yes.
Is there any capability for electronic 1099 filing with IRS?
Not with Great Plains. I'm not sure if there's some ISVs. I would think. Yeah, I think Green Shades. Oh, you'll talk about that? Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, fixed assets. As you can see, fixed assets, I don't have anything up here for fiscal or calendar year, so you must do that at the end of your fiscal year only, or that's the only time you have to do that. Okay, and that's why we do it in the order that we talked about before with the inventory, the payables, the receivables, and now fixed assets. And this is why, because you have to close payables management first before you close fixed assets. And now, if you do use fixed assets, I'm not sure how many of you in here actually do. Jeff, you use that. There's different books that you can have. You can have an unlimited number of books. And what we mean by that is like a corporate book, an AMT book, a tax book, things like that that you can have that would have different tax rates or different depreciation rates in there. So what you have to do is you can do them each separately, but you have to do them all before you can do any processing for the new year. If you try to do it, it'll give you an error that you're not in the current year. You don't have the current year. It hasn't been closed yet. So they all have to be in the same year there. Okay. So what does it do? Again, as we keep thinking of the bucket theory, we take that year-to-date amount and we move it over. Okay, so it just goes over to last year. There's different places and different lookups where this information is stored. So for example, in the general information, you can see it's cleared from the year-to-date amount, maintenance amount is cleared, which you would expect because that's what you're doing. You're clearing it, you're getting it ready for the next year. Then there's also another asset book window, which again is under the cards, but it's under the different book. Your year-to-date depreciation is still cleared, which is what we want. Your life-to-date depreciation is also changed, okay, because now that's being updated, so that's going to move over. Some other things like the cost basis and then the salvage value is also changed. And again, if you use the fixed asset module, you know what I'm talking about. If not, you're probably just kind of, oh, okay, thanks. And then once you do that, what you'll see is that, like for example, actually I think I have a screenshot of it. No, I don't. Okay, I thought I did. Kind of like in the other window where you're picking what your if you want to do the calendar or the fiscal year or all, and then the date. In this case, the fiscal year for each book, you'll see a list of your books, and it'll have the year the open year in there. And what you can do, again, you can insert each one individually, or you can just pick them all. Like if you have a ton of them, just hit the all button. It'll move over to that other place on this in the same screen there, and then you can just hit year and close, and it'll close all those books together. What that will do then is that we'll take that year. So for example, right now, if you're doing 2017, it'll say 2016 corporate book, 2016 AMT book, things like that. Once you do that, that current fiscal year then will be changed to the next year. So whichever it is that you're working on, that's how you know that it has worked, because it will be on your current fiscal year once you're done with the closing for that. And then these are just some of the things, as you can see. This is the asset book, that what I was talking about, the second one in the previous screen, where the life-to-date depreciation, I'm sorry, year-to-date depreciation has been zeroed out and has moved over to the life-to-date. So again, you're starting fresh with the new year. There's no year-to-date depreciation until you run the first month for the depreciation.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
We don't use that feature, but if we would, move towards that, what if you selected the wrong depreciation, you close the year, can you go back in and correct that? Or maybe at the end of the year, you decide that you're not going to use the section 179, and then come March, you decide you're going to use it?
Hey, Chris, we're talking about opening up closed fixed asset books. Have we've done that before or not? Okay. I know we've done it for other, like we've opened up other.
Probably would have figured out.
Yeah, probably is. Yeah. It's not self-evident. I mean, we would have to research that and see how you would do that. But I would assume we'd be able to reverse a close on fixed asset. I would think. I don't know.
As Microsoft, they have the script first. Is what I was suggesting.
Okay. Yeah.
We need credit instant on there.
Yeah. If that happens, that's a good question though. Thanks. Okay, so this is again talking about the buckets again. So this is the smart list on what those buckets show. Again, your year-to-date depreciation moving over to your life-to-date, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so what are the steps? And again, we've got the that KB article 865653. So again, make sure that you just appreciate everything. So you have to run through your process. So you want to do your monthly processes first. Okay, do all your monthly processes like you normally would as long as you're on the monthly calendar. Print all you need. Print all those reports that you might need. And also there's also a year-end report that comes out, and that's a status report for everything that's been affected. So you can take a look at that first, then make your backup, and then go ahead and do your closing. Okay, so again, it's you want to make sure you've done all of your monthly depreciation, because you want to get that last month in there for the year, and then go ahead and do your closing to move all those over from the buckets. Okay. Oops. Questions on fixed assets? Anything? Nothing? Anything from you? No. Good. Okay. Good. Okay. I don't think anybody raised their hand on analytical accounting, which is good because there's no separate process anyway for it. So it automatically closes along with your GL and anything like that. I mean, since there's nobody in there, I'm not going to spend the time on doing that. But there are a few steps that you can do to check it beforehand. But again, there's no separate process for analytical accounting. If you did, though, the one thing that you would make sure is that it is installed on your workstation before you try closing. It's always important. Okay, so general ledger. This has been misunderstood over the years, I think. A lot of people think they have to wait until they get all your year-end adjustments before they can close general ledger. That is not the case. What you can do is you can close your general ledger. Well, first of all, if you don't close your general ledger, you're not going to get your beginning balances when you run your financial statements, for example. So those you won't even be able to have. Second thing is that when you do close your general ledger year, if you make an entry, if you make an adjustment to that prior year, it will automatically update your retained earnings. Now you're going to have to print your statements off again because those are, your accounts would have changed. But what it will do, it will automatically update your retained earnings in those years. So in other words, if it's the middle of January and you have an adjustment, it could be the middle of March. I mean, it could be any time after you do the year-end close for GL. If you make an entry to December, it will automatically update those, the correct buckets. It knows which ones to do. Now again, that will turn off, or that will change your year-end balance sheet or income statement if you printed those off and you maybe published them or something like that. Probably shouldn't have done that anyway if you're still going to do adjustments. But if you did, those would need to be redone because those will have changed based on what you've, the entry that you've made.
So if you need to make an entry, you just go back over the fiscal period then?
Yes, you just by unchecking that box, yes, because you do have to have that period has to be open. But again, you would only uncheck the box for the financial because that's all you would be affecting would be the financial. Mm-hmm. Yep. So again, I know there's some misinformation. I've heard it. I've heard clients talk about it. Is that because there's a way to unclose a year. We've done that before as well, but that's only under extreme circumstances. You don't close the year, and then when you get an adjustment, open the year back up, and then go back and make that entry. You don't have to do that. That's just wasted time and effort. So again, the one thing I want you to remember is that the general ledger, it is date sensitive, so it knows how to correct everything if you make an adjustment after you've closed the year in that closed period.
So in theory, when you think you're done closing your year end, you can go ahead and do this process, and then if down the road your auditors have adjustments,
Exactly.
you go in and uncheck the box
Yes.
and post those entries in that.
Right, and then what I would suggest though is doing them, again, putting the date for the transaction 12/31, 2017, for example. Let's say we're doing it, this year. Just so that, and again, have a good description on there so that you know that that's what it is. It's an adjustment, because that should stick out anyways. The 12/31 entry in your GL.
And my understanding is you can go back, if you close that year, you can only go back
That 1 year, the last closed year, correct? Yes. Yep. But that'll save you a lot of time. And plus, again, your financial statements just won't be right. Your balance sheet won't be right until you do the year-end close for GL anyway. So.
You can't roll forward any GL balances then for reconciling.
Right. It won't roll anything. The close process is what rolls it, and I think I have that in here on what it does. Yes.
So let me ask you
Mm-hmm.
this. So if I go in and post an adjustment, then does it reflect in that beginning balance?
Yes, it will update that. That's exactly, it knows exactly what to do. It knows it, again, it will read it, what account you're going to. Is it a retained earnings account? Is it a P&L account, or is it a balance sheet account? It'll make the proper adjustment. So in other words, balance sheet account, it doesn't update anything except the beginning balance. P&L account, of course, you would have to, post it to retained earnings, whichever it is that you're doing, and close out that. If it's an expense account, for example, it would have to close that out for the year. So it does all that for you. You don't even have to think about it. But you'll see the in and out when you make the adjustment. You'll see, if you go back and look at you only have to do the one adjustment. So you only have to do the debit and the credit on for the one. But if you go back and look at the detail for that, you'll see all the in and out going into just like you did a year-end close. It basically goes through and does the year-end close again for you. But it's only for that account or whatever accounts that you touched in there. So it's pretty quick to do that. Okay, sure.
Is this the same thing for monthly closings? If the period is closed, will the GL automatically update if an adjustment entry is made with the month being closed?
There is no monthly closing.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there is no monthly closing in GL or in GP. You can turn off posting, but that is not a close. Does that answer them for them?
I think so.
Okay. Okay. Some people even call that a soft close, something like that. Again, you're either turn on or turn off posting is all you do. There is no monthly posting process in GP for any of the modules. Okay, good. Okay, so what exactly does it do? Again, kind of what we talked about, closes all your P&L accounts to your retained earnings, leaves them with a zero balance for the beginning of the new year. Okay. For your balance sheet accounts, it just updates the beginning balance, but leaves the balance in there because, of course, that's your balance sheet, so that needs to be in there. And your retained earnings account is, you can close to more than one retained earnings account. If you do have more, when you go to the closing window, it'll ask you if you want to close to like a divisional retained earnings account. Those accounts just have to be set up. So as long as they're set up, oh, what happened? Oh, okay. Yep, I'm back. Nope. Okay, I'm back. Don't do anything. Let me see your hands. Okay, so again, you can close them to a divisional retained earnings. So for example, if you have separate divisions that you have different retained earnings accounts for, when you close the year, it will actually look at those and it will determine which ones are for which division, for example, and then you'll have a separate P&L for each of those divisions. Okay, so it knows what to do. Once you get that set up, it knows exactly what to do. So again, what can you do during the year-end close process? Here's some of the things that you can do. Again, some of the, you'll see the boxes when you go in there. There's different choices that you can make, options that you can have. Do you want to remove some of the unused segments? Okay, it's optional. I don't normally do that. I normally just leave those alone. But again, it's up to you, however you want to do that, if you want to clean that up. Any inactive GL accounts, you can remove those if you want. One thing I do recommend, and whenever I'm doing a year-end close with somebody, what I'll do first, and it doesn't take that long at all, is to make sure that your retained earning accounts are set up as, all of your retained earnings accounts, your P&L accounts, are set up as P&L accounts. And all your balance sheet accounts are set up as balance sheet accounts, because inadvertently you may set up a new account, and let's say it's a P&L account, and you set it up as a balance sheet account. Well, when you go to close the year end, it's not going to close out, and you're going to say, what the heck's going on? So what you can do, and what I always do, is that I'll go into Smart List, and I'll just do a real quick Smart List on accounts. And what I'll do is if you use Smart List, you'll understand what I'm saying, but you can do the different filters where you can say, what type of account is this? So I choose all the balance sheet accounts. Most of the time, the balance sheet accounts are going to be your, I'm just going to use how I would do it, the 1,000 for the cash, 2,000, for the liabilities, 3,000 for your net worth. Then you start in 4,000 with your P&L accounts, and on down to 99.99, something like that. So all your expense accounts would be below would be 4,000 and above. All of your balance sheet accounts would be 39.99 and less. Okay. So what I will do is I'll go in there and I'll do a Smart List and say, okay, show me all accounts that are marked as a balance sheet account, but that have an account number that's greater than 4,000 or greater. So what that's going to show you then is that if you set something up incorrectly, you're going to catch it right there, and then you can change it. Then what I'll do on the reverse side, then as long as that comes out clean, then I'll go and do the exact same opposite, where I'll say, give me all P&L accounts that are less than 4,000, the account number. And then that'll show me if I maybe set up a balance sheet account and marked it as a P&L account. Okay. So that's just a tip that you can, because if you don't do that, there's ways to fix that, but it's not pretty. So you don't want to do that. Okay, again, like what I said there, review the GL account list. You can do that to make sure all the accounts are set up correctly. I would recommend, like I said, doing a Smart List. If you need help with that, I can help you with that. I can give you different, again, it's really simple. It's just two of them, balance sheet, that's going to show all of your balance sheet accounts, and your P&L accounts that are going to show all your P&L accounts. So you would see if anything's out of whack there. Okay, and then that's a good KB article then there, 888003, shows all the detail of your year-end closing procedures for GL. And again, backups. One other thing with the GL, because it does take a lot of space. I mean, there are some things on there, so just make sure you have enough free space, because what you'll see, sometimes the backup will fail, and if you go in and look at the event viewer, for example, it'll say you're out of space, or if you just check, you'll see that you're out of space. Because what it's going to do, it might increase it says right there, your GL 20,000 table will double in size. So again, just make sure you have enough free space on the drive where your databases are. Okay, and do it at the server. Do not do it from a workstation that is connected to the server or the terminal server. Do it directly on the server. And of course, make sure everybody's out. And the last thing on there is sometimes this doesn't happen much anymore, but on some of the older, if you have an older server, for example, it'll look like it just maybe says not responding, or it just keeps running. Do not stop it. Just let it go. It'll keep running. It's working. Trust me, it's working. So just be patient and let it run. And then again, here are some of the different knowledge base articles. Again, they're getting all these, right? They'll have access to all these. Okay, good. Okay. So I won't go over these. Again, the third one there, changing the posting type on account after you close the year. That's what I was talking about before. If you run those smart lists, you will avoid that and the hassle that goes with that. Okay, so please, I just implore you to do that. All right, so, oh, I'm sorry, let me go back. Any questions on GL year-end close? We're almost done. The last thing is just to talk about the payroll stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I did mine at the end of September. I did all of the modules, but my customer sales numbers, they did not move forward from this year to last year. And I had to go to SQL Server and run scripts to get that. Is that normal? Did I miss a closing step?
Probably, yeah. We would have to look and see what I mean, again, it's in hindsight, it's kind of hard to see exactly what you did, but yeah, that shouldn't.
But generally though, if I do a customer inquiry and I see this year's sales, last year's sales, that should have moved forward and bucketized through one of those steps.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
my other question is, what are the modules that have calendar year close separate from fiscal?
Payables and receivables.
That's it?
That's it. Mm-hmm. Any questions from the cloud? Okay, so the very last thing then is to talk about the year-end update itself. It has been released. As a matter of fact, we've done a few in here already. The year-end update is a service pack. So if you are using payroll, you must have it because there are some changes to payroll and ACA, things like that. If you let me see if I can show you. Okay, here's some of the changes. No W-2 changes. There are some electronic filing changes if you do use that. There's also some quality fixes again for payroll year-end. As you can see, most of the first four are just all payroll stuff. ACA updates, form and code changes. So if you're also required to do ACA, well, if you're doing payroll, you have to do payroll. You have to do this anyway. So if you're doing ACA, you're already doing payroll. The only thing that would affect non-payroll people is the very last one there, and that's the fixed assets luxury auto depreciation change. And I don't know that anybody in here is actually even using fixed assets from what you're talking about before. But if you do, that is, or if somebody's on the line there that uses fixed assets luxury auto depreciation, you must do the year-end update. The year-end update is the service pack. That is separate than the year-end close. Okay. You need to have them both. I mean, you need to do the year-end update, and you can do the year-end update now, but that is a service pack. So as you notice on here, there are no 1099 or anything like that, any changes for payables. So in the past, there have been some things that have changed with 1099s, which would require non-payroll customers to actually have to do the service pack as well. That is not the case this year, as you can see. Yes?
Where do you set up which net asset account an account closes to? We need a debt to close out to restricted net asset instead of
in the setup for general ledger, you determine what your retained earnings account is. Okay, so what you post, and then also when you go to close the year, it gives you the choice of, you have to select the retained earnings account that you want to close it to. So it's whatever account you want. And then of course, like I said before, if you have the divisional, you just check that box and then each of those would go to each individual division. But it's still that same retained earnings account. Okay? Hopefully that answers that on there. Okay, so again, in the past, so there were some 1099 changes, so even if you didn't have payroll, you had to do the year-end update, year-end service pack. That is not the case this year. One thing, though, that I would recommend is, and this is what I've seen now with the last couple of service packs, and if you've gone through an upgrade recently in the last couple of years, you've noticed this as well. You have to be on a certain service pack level to do some things. It is now filtered down to the actual service pack level. So, for example, if you had skipped a couple years, in the past it was like if you just installed Great Plains, let's say 2010, and then 3 years later you wanted to put on the very latest service pack. You could just download the latest service pack and install it. It would upgrade everything. update, not upgrade, update everything to that latest service pack. Now, and recently, this is just recently, you actually had to be on a certain level, a prior service pack, before you can apply this service pack. So I'm assuming that that's going to go forward with with the way that I've seen it, especially with the upgrades. Again, you have to do, some of you, if you have done upgrades lately, you know that you have to be on a certain service pack level to even upgrade, okay? So my point is that even if you have 1099s and you see that there's no changes for you, you don't want to go through with this, I still would recommend getting that year-end update done, maybe January, February, March, whatever it is, just to stay current. Okay, you don't have to do it. I know there's a lot going on with year-end and things like that you have to do, and you're probably busy doing that. But I would still recommend getting that done and staying current. At least once a year, I would recommend having a service pack done for everybody. It only takes about a day, again, depending on how long, how many databases you have, things like that, and how fast your server is. And if you run into any issues, right? Okay, so again, the second note that I had here is that it does include the previously released service packs, hotfix, compliance updates, and et cetera. However, like I said, you still have to be on a certain level to be able to get to this latest year-end update. Okay. So again, stay as current as you can. Now again, with the payroll, if you're already doing payroll and you do require the ACA, well, if you're not new, then most of you would, or all of you, if you're doing ACA, would have the HR module already installed. So you would be using that. And again, that is free. So if you're prior to, you would know this if you're on payroll and you're tracking ACA. If you're prior to 2013, you would not be able to do that. And also, if you do need help with the ACAs, just let us know. Contact support. Okay, so when should it be run with the payroll? Again, the payroll year-end close is different than the year-end service pack. So the service pack can be done at any time. The service pack, it can be done right now. All right, the year-end close is after, it's got a very strict schedule. So it's after your current year payrolls are complete. So again, finish all those, make your backup, and before you process the runs for the new year. Okay, so again, just make sure your last payroll is done, everything's reconciled, everything looks good, you're ready to go. You run the payroll year-end close, see if it does it. Okay, so what does it do? What it does is it creates a file called the year-end wage file. And what that does is that keeps all the information in there that you'll need to process your W-2s, your W-3s, your 10, everything that is kept in there. That's why you need to finish everything first before you do the year-end close, because again, it's going to take all that, put it in this file, and then that file just sits out there. So then once you do that, then you can go back in and start doing your next year. So if you're ready, once you're done with your last payroll, go ahead and do that, create the year-end wage file, and you're ready to go for the next year. That's as simple as it is, because all that information that you have, again, make sure it's right. You can always go back and recreate the year-end wage file, but not after you've already run payroll for the next year. So let's say you thought you did all the year-end, all your payroll runs, you created your year-end wage. Before you do your next year, your first payroll run for 2018, let's say we're using that as an example, you find out that you forgot a bonus check or something like that. You can still go in and do that, and what you would do is you would just recreate that year-end wage file. It would put all that new information into that file, and you got it there ready to go. It'll be all updated. Then you can go ahead and do your 2018.
Make a backup so if you forget
Backups.
something, you don't remember until after you've done the first payroll of 2018. Restore it someplace. Yeah.
Make a backup. Yes.
So you keep saying making backups. Does that mean I'm just going to hang on the phone here with my accounting department and keep backing up SQL? Or is there a button within Dynamics that you can just back it up?
There are, but you have to be on the server to do that. And I would recommend actually doing that. But again, as long as you're on the server, there are steps that you can just go into the different, it's under the administration, and then you just go to backup. Just ask you, where do you want to back it up? You can even back it up to Azure storage, things like that. But again, you can just back it up to a shared file on your server, for example.
Right.
Okay. But yeah, you can do that. Yep.
Typically.
Now, the only thing with that is that you have to do each one individually. if you're doing it through GP and you have to be on the server. So, if you have a lot of, again, if you have, quite a few databases, what I do is I would create a maintenance plan in SQL, and then I would just choose, I always call it, if you look at your SQL and you see that, you can tell I've been on there because it'll say on-demand GP backup. That's my name for it. So what I do is I just choose the backup or choose the database, because there's a list then that you can choose multiple databases for that, and just save that to that maintenance plan. Then you just run it whenever you need it. And then it'll go through and it'll back up all those together and put them wherever you want. You tell it where you want it to go. But if you don't want to go that step, then yes, through GP, but you would do it one at a time. Okay, and again, when you're doing these backups, make sure you're backing up not only the company database, but also the Dynamics database. It's very important. Not just company, but Dynamics. Actually, you want all your companies and Dynamics. Again, there's that 850-663 if you have payroll and you want to look at that. Okay. But again, make sure before you, the one thing to take away from this is before you run any checks for the new year, make sure that year-end wage file is correct, or is created and is correct. Because it's a lot easier to correct it beforehand than after. And then here's just some of the different things where it is. Again, the year-end wage file it's in the different tables in there, and this is where you go to edit, print your W-2s and also your electronic files. Again, some of the, you'll get this. This is some of the different information I put in there in case you have it from, for example, the SSA or something like that, if you want to verify the electronic files. I think you have to do that. I think that's a requirement anyway if you're going to send that in that way. Okay, so to recap, well, first of all, any questions on payroll? Any more questions on payroll? Anything like that? Yes. Yeah.
You don't update the tax tables until after you run the last payroll, right, or before you run the...
Correct. What you want to do is you want to get the last, when you're doing the year-end service pack, and that's what I did for you guys, is that I'll go in and do the automatic update for 2017 just to get the very last one in there.
Right.
Okay?
But I'm talking about...
Right, but once you go to do the next year, yes, make sure that you have the 2018 tax tables update in there.
But do it after...
After the year-end wage, right, because that year-end wage file, that's what that does, is it looks at that information, and that's what it creates the year-end wage file with that. Okay. Now the only thing with that, Jeff, like if you would forget to do it, that just means you're on the old rates. Right. It's not the end of the world, but
well, last year they didn't update Missouri until late.
Yeah, so. I remember that. Yeah. So either you over withheld or you're under withheld some people. So things like that. So it's not the big of a deal. I mean, you want to get it correct, obviously. So if it's out there, go ahead and do it. Yeah. Okay, again, to recap, this is the order that we want to go through in the year-end close: inventory, sales, purchasing, fixed assets, then GL. And again, I just want to make sure that you realize, again, that the date-sensitive features, so it's best to close your year on time as much as possible. And then there's a recap of the different knowledge-based resources, the KB articles that you would want to use. I think that's all I have. Yep. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
How do you get to those knowledge base?
Well, with the number, you could just go to, you could just put it in Google. Just type in KB 888003 and it'll come right up for you.